Hello and welcome to the Transcend and Succeed show. I'm your guest host, Megan North, and today's guest is someone who I've only just recently met, but I was absolutely hooked once we started speaking. And once you hear her introduction, you'll know why. Genie Joseph is a trust technique practitioner, a positive dog trainer, and an animal communicator. Yep, that's right, an animal communicator. She's the executive director of the non-profit, the Human Animal Connection. This is an organization where they bring trained therapy animals to high school students, veterans, health providers, and emergency responders. Working with over 4,000 service members, they've been given President Obama's Volunteer Service Award for this work. Genie is the author of 4 books, including the Human Animal Connection, Deepening Relationships with Animals and Ourselves, and her newest book, Wholesome Canine Cuisine, Homemade Healthy Dog Food and Treats. Genie is also an ordained animal chaplain. Welcome to the show, Genie. I am so happy that you're joining us today.
Well, so good to be with you.
Wow, so an ordained animal chaplain, what is that? Well, can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah, well, we help animals with their people.
Right. Animal with, oh, okay. So it's the other way.
Exactly. It's the other way. I mean, we work with grief. People are preparing for loss. We help them through that process. And after animals have passed, we help them stay connected if they're ready to do that. And so it's a range of things that people need, but it's very animal centered in the sense of it's all about respecting what the animals' opinions are and helping humans and animals get more in sync.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. Because people, they really struggle when their animal is unwell and if they have to make the decision to let their animal go. And I think that is absolutely beautiful that you can help a family and I guess the animal as well when they're going through this period of time.
Yeah, because we don't want animals to suffer. And, a lot of people think, well, I just want to let them go naturally. I don't want to intervene. But naturally would be the animal goes out and sits under a tree and becomes lunch for another animal. You know what I mean? That's the natural thing. And they don't have that opportunity when they're living with us in our homes. And so there are times where we have to put aside our own desire to keep them with us and recognize that it may be their time. And they're not afraid of death. That's a human thing to be afraid of death. We are very scared of it because we don't understand it. And, we don't know what's next. And they do. They are often ready when I talk to them when they're in that stage, and they'll say, your human is wondering, is it time? And what should I tell them? And they say, I'm ready. I know the human isn't, but I am. And so when it's time because suffering is not fun. Animals do not enjoy suffering.
No. Well, we don't either, do we? So
we don't. Well, we're animals too. So.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful gift that you have. And actually, I don't think I shared this with you when we've met before, but I have this innate sense to be able to tune into dogs.
That's
So
right.
dogs chat to me as well. So I've healed many dogs as well, particularly car sickness. I have this, I don't know why, but I have a lot of people asking me, can they have a chat to their dog and to heal their car sickness? And you would know this, but the animals have got amazing personalities, and the conversations that I've had with them, and I'm sure you have too, have just been fascinating.
Absolutely fascinating. You never know who's going to be a philosopher, who's going to be a jokester, who's going to be, a prankster. I mean, as many personalities as we have with people, that's what we discover when we're communicating with animals. So it's
Yeah.
wonderful that you have that gift, because if I ever get anyone who calls me with that, I can refer them to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's something that I actually don't advertise. And someone said to me the other day, you should tell people you do this. So there
Yeah.
you go. I'm now telling on the show.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Definitely.
it's not about me today. So Jeannie, I understand that the human animal connection has principles. And so can you tell us what the first principle is and
Yeah.
what does it mean?
Yeah, we have 33 principles in the human animal connection that guides all of our work and informs everything that we do. And the first principle is the idea of good medicine, meaning the power of goodness to heal. So every time we see our dog and say, "Oh, good doggy, who's a good doggy? You're a good doggy." Every time we do that, it's not only good for them, but it's good for us, because we're feeling the goodness. We're in an energy exchange of goodness. So good kitty, good donkey, whoever it is that you're sharing your life with, the more often you say that, because they can feel, it's not necessarily that they know the word good. I mean, some do, but they feel the goodness in your heart as you're saying that. So every time you say good doggy, you invoke a sense of goodness that's shared between the two of you. So it's one of the ways to strengthen the bond between humans and animals, is to continually, notice the good. I mean, there's always going to be something that an animal does that's not your preference and behaviorally. But if we take the point of view that the animal is doing a certain behavior because of a certain emotion, then it takes the sort of badness, the quote unquote bad dog, out of the equation, because we're understanding that there's an innate goodness. So the animal is innately good. We are innately good. The experience between us is innately good. And there are things that we don't like that we can change, that we can communicate about, that we can adjust, that we can teach the animals, no, this isn't my preference.
Mhm.
This is what I want you to do. But a lot of times people don't know how to communicate, number one, and they don't understand the behavior, the emotion rather, that's driving the behavior.
Mm.
So every time you're looking at a behavior, you want to ask yourself, well, what might my dog be feeling when they're doing that thing? And that will help you to take out the judgment of good, bad, that whole dichotomy, and recognize that it's all good. And
Mhm.
usually when animals are seriously misbehaving, it's usually because they are not feeling safe. It's usually what drives a lot of behavior, or they want to connect and they don't know how. So
Mhm.
this is one of the things that helps us humans understand, is that a lot of these behaviors that are maybe more extreme are coming from an emotion that the animal doesn't know how to handle. They don't know how to get a different result.
Okay. And it's really interesting when you're talking about that because it's so similar to us as humans, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it is.
when we see a friend and we're filled with joy and we're chatting, that energy is high and filled with love and connection. And it just makes sense that when we're telling our puppy dog or our animal that they're a good, oh my gosh, you're so good today, it
Yeah,
brings that joy as well, doesn't it?
it really does. I mean, too bad we can't do that in human to human. Oh, you're such a good human. Imagine, the strangers in the grocery line. Oh, you're such a good human. You're so good. The world would be a happier place.
It would be.
So
It would
often
be.
we get the opposite. We get criticism, all the time, at work or
Mm.
wherever. And, it would be wonderful if we were expressing, or at least seeing, even if we don't want to say it, maybe it's a little too embarrassed to say it to a stranger, but imagine if that stranger in line next to you, if you were just thinking, that's a good person.
Mm.
That's a good person. Now, it may or may not change their behavior, but it will certainly change your experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it removes all the judgment and the way that you feel. Yeah, it's beautiful. And so when we're talking about energy, so how are emotions and energy contagious? and how does that then impact the healing?
Yeah, so all emotions are also energy, and they move like energy. So you can have an experience. You probably had the experience. You wake up and you're perfectly happy, and you go into work or some situation, and all of a sudden you're like, ugh, you're angry, or you can feel it in the tension in the air. You can cut it like butter or something. It's just, you can feel it. And so the truth is that all emotions are contagious, the good ones and the bad ones. And so knowing that, we can choose which emotions we want to be spreading. So if we're spreading energy that feels good, that's loving, that's kind, that's compassionate, that's going to spread. That's going to, radiate out from us. And those who are ready to accept it will. Those who are not ready to accept it maybe won't. And that's okay, because we're not here to fix other people. And that's not our job. Our job is to make conscious choices about what energy we want to extend. That's our job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with animals, they are so sensitive, especially the domestic animals. All animals are sensitive, but the domestic animals have been sensitized to human emotions. So if they've been, dogs, cats, horses, they've been sharing lives with humans for a long time. And they have become adept at sensing energy. And some animals are better at than others, just like some people are better than others. Some people are more tuned in to other people or whatever. So some animals are very tuned in, and they really express they feel what you're feeling, even if you don't feel it. So I was just working with a client this morning with an animal communication exercise, and her issue was her cat was having irritable bowel issues, and she'd been to the vet and gotten this diagnosis, and they put her on the food. The vet put her on the wrong food, but anyway, the vet put her on a special diet, which wasn't helping. But anyway, so we were looking at it not from the point. I'm not a veterinarian, so I'm not looking at it diagnostically, but I was looking at what is the emotional energy between the two of them that is holding this dynamic in place. And I realized that she was not saying no when she needed to say no. So she would say yes, even if she didn't mean it. And so it was like she couldn't really digest her own emotions. Her own feelings were kind of causing an indigestion emotionally for her, and the cat was expressing it physically. And so once she understood that, she went, oh, wow. She was realizing that she would just go along with whatever, to please or say yes when she didn't really mean it or she didn't fully mean it. And I said, it's not always black and white. Sometimes you just need to make an adjustment. Say, well, yes, I'd like to go to that show with you, but could we go tomorrow? I'm really tired tonight or something. There's ways that you can find the nuances, and that's what was going on in the dynamic between her and her cat. So the cat was actually expressing something that she wasn't even aware of emotionally herself.
Wow. So that subconscious, the cat picked up the subconscious. And isn't that interesting? Because I would think then that if she had gone to, say, maybe the doctor, or she was just talking to someone generally, and someone said, oh, you really need to sort this out because, it's really affecting you. Some people then don't tend to, I'm not ready, or I'll deal with that later. But I bet now that the cat is actually having the symptoms caused by her unhealed issues that she's got, I bet you anything she'll take action.
I think you're exactly right, because sometimes people are not motivated for whatever reason, or they don't know how to fix their own issues. But when they see that it's negatively affecting the animal that shares their lives, they're really ready. And we see this with veterans a lot, that they don't want to talk about their emotions, right? Because their emotions are painful, right? So, but when they see that their emotions are affecting the animal, then they're motivated to learn, okay, I got to let this stuff go because this is affecting my dog.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And I suppose then that would have a flow-on effect, particularly for a vet, that if it's affecting their animal at home, but then they would then start to understand that it's probably affecting all the animals that are coming in that they're treating as well, because they haven't healed something in themselves.
Yeah. Veterinary offices are very difficult because the energy can hang around. So, especially if you have been in the room where the euthanasias are done, it's a lot of energy hanging around. And so, and that's one of the reasons why veterinarians they have one of the highest suicide rates of any profession, because they don't they got into it for all the right reasons. They wanted to help animals, and what they end up with is, in many cases, not enough solutions, for all the, even at a physical level, there's often things they can't help. The bottom line is they don't have really a lot of good options. And so it's very hard. And then on top of that, the animals come in, and, the first animal's very scared. The second animal's very scared. The third animal comes in, wasn't scared, but is scared now, because they can smell the pheromones of fear that are left behind. So it's energetic, but it's also chemical, the chemistry that's left behind of fear. And the animals are very much sensing our emotions through. They can smell fear on us. They can smell joy on us. They can smell happiness on us, love on us.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. I knew this conversation I'm just fascinated, Jeannie. I'm just fascinated.
Oh, good.
So how do animals connect with us? What do they know, and what are we learning from them?
Oh my gosh. It's they know so much. I have to tell you one story. This was a friend of mine who's an animal communicator. She lives in Switzerland. So this is her story, but she gives me permission to tell. When she was learning to be an animal communicator, there was a rabbit that she really wanted to talk with. I think it was her rabbit. But anyway, so she goes to the rabbit. She says, hey, I'm learning animal communication. I really want to talk. And the rabbit said, I am a philosopher. You are not at my level. Go and study and come back. So she goes and she studies, and she's doing all this work, and she's working on herself, doing all the work very diligently. 6 months later, comes back, and the rabbit says, I am a philosopher. You are not at my level. And this goes on like 3 times. So finally, after 2 years, she goes back to the rabbit, and the rabbit says, okay, we're going to write a book together.
Wow.
And she and the rabbit wrote a book.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I forgot what your question was, but what was your question? I don't know if that was but they teach us in so many ways. There's so many ways that they offer us learning, but I think that fundamentally they're teaching us to love this moment, to be here right now, and to love that there's nothing more important than loving. I think that's their main lesson.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful.
And that's the world that they live in. Unless they've been traumatized or in a bad situation, then they are very much just whatever is now is good.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Look, I think we might take a quick break, because
Sure.
I will come back to the question that I was asking before, because I feel like that's going to be a longer answer. So we'll just take a quick break and just watch a couple of ads, and we'll come back. Thanks, Jeannie. Welcome back, and we're here with Genie Joseph, and we're talking all things about the human-animal connection. And so Jeannie and I were just talking before the break about how do animals actually connect with us, Jeannie? How does that happen? How does that work?
Yeah, well, it's a really beautiful thing because animals connect with us through love. And it's the one thing that we're like looking for. And, that story of looking for love in all the wrong places is not to say that human love isn't, wonderful, but there's an aspect of the way in which animals love us beyond words, beyond judgments, beyond conditions, beyond circumstances. And sometimes that's the love that we're craving. And that's why we take it out on a partner, because they're human. They're acting in a human way. They're loving us in a human manner, which is good. But sometimes we have this craving for this other kind of connection, this connection that animals can give us, where they just really see us, beyond how much money we make or what we look like or what kind of car we drive. They just see our essence. And we're so hungry to be seen in that way,
Yeah.
that it's so, and that, there's so many ways that they touch us. They touch us by making us laugh, by bringing us into the present moment. But I have to tell you one story. This is from our high school class. We have a class called Canines Teach Compassion.
Yeah.
And this is where we bring dogs into the high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one boy, and he was a freshman. This was right after COVID, when they just opened up the schools. And he was, a freshman younger, but he looked a lot younger. Like he just didn't fit, and he was very quiet. He didn't talk. It wasn't that he didn't have the ability to talk, but he didn't, emotionally, he just couldn't connect because everybody was kind of bigger than him. He was about maybe 90 pounds or something, it was really slight, and never spoke. And this one dog that we had in class was an English bull mastiff. So this is 130 pounds of dog. And therapy dogs are not allowed to lick. It's just one of the things that they have to get trained out of because, it's just you go to hospitals and, you're not just, so they don't lick. So this dog's name was Shadow. And Shadow had been to class, several times, never licked anybody. This boy walks in his red hoodie, just all kind of hidden and tucked in. And Shadow went over to him. His name was Patrick, and he licked him. And then he licked him. And then he licked him. And he could not stop licking him. And all the kids, all of our attention was on him. He was laughing. We were laughing, not at him, but with him, because it was so interesting to see this dog pick this one boy and basically said, "You are my boy," because Shadow had said hello to everyone, was friendly to everyone, but none of this, like, "You're my boy," and for him to be seen like that, he didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to produce a behavior. He didn't have to write a paper. He just had to show up. Right. And after that, you couldn't shut him up. He just wanted to talk all the time. What are we doing next? Can we do that? Can we do this again? I wanted that. It was just so funny to see this complete transformation, and he had been in counseling and, nothing had changed, on the traditional route. But Shadow changed him, because Shadow saw his essence, his quality, his nature, and just whatever it was, past life. I don't know what it was, but, Shadow picked him. And sometimes we'll see that with dogs that in the class, they'll, our therapy dogs are trained to say hello to everyone who wants to say hello. But I often see that a dog will pick one student and it's like, this is theirs, like Harry, my latest therapy dog. There was this one girl, again, totally silent, never talked. You could barely, if you asked her a question, you could maybe get one syllable, yes, no, that was it, And Harry would just lay with her, and they would just lay down in the together. They would just lay there for the whole time, and it was just like she just needed that contact, that physical connection. And in today's world, most of us are touch hungry,
Yeah.
because we don't live in communities where there's a lot of closeness and, a lot of people living alone, a lot of people feeling lonely. And, animals they just fill that. It's like an empty cup, and they just fill it up.
Yeah.
Not every animal. It's about 20% of animals that really have the sole purpose of being a therapy animal. Just like with people, not every person wants to be healing work with others. You know what I mean? So about 20% of these dogs that are really good at therapy dogs, a lot of dogs don't pass the test. You know, people think, oh, my dog would be such a great therapy. She's so happy. She's so friendly. She loves everybody. And then, you know, that's just one part of being a therapy dog. So it's a very special kind of dog that does this work. But when you find one that does this, did I tell you about Oscar? Should I tell you about Oscar?
No, you didn't tell me. No, please tell us.
Yeah, so when I was working with the soldiers that were hospitalized with PTSD, and then, you know, they'd be sitting in a circle, and I would bring in Oscar, who was this, we call them pit bulls here in the U.S. I don't know what you call them there,
Yeah.
like Staffordshire. Yeah. Big old tough guy, had come from terrible situations, which I won't tell you, missing teeth, scars all over his body, really sad look, you know, really like, oh my God, what he had been through. He literally had been a prisoner of war, forced to fight and all that. So he was just the sweetest dog. And he had the ability to read people like a book. So he would come and, you know, group of soldiers, and he'd go and he'd say hello, hello to each one in the circle. He would do what's called an alert, which means he would just sit and look at one person until they melted, you know, and he could tell who was the most in trouble in that moment in a whole group of people who were in trouble, right? He could see, okay, here's my one. And he would do this every session. He would do it with kids. He would do it with adults. I mean, he just knew this person needs me now. And you get these big, tough guys would get down on the floor and rub his belly and dog baby talk to this dog, you know, and, you know, had people who hadn't been wanting to talk before. And all of a sudden they're just mush on the floor with a really tough dog. It was so sweet.
Wow.
And that was Oscar. So Oscar's really the one that set me on this path.
Right.
You know, because I had no idea, but it was when I saw what the dog could do in such a short period of time, I was like, wow, why am I working so hard when the dog can just have these breakthroughs? It's just.
And can I just ask you, can we just go back to Patrick, what you were just talking about before, the young child in the hoodie? So when Shadow started to lick him and then he started to become really animated, does that then change the energy in the room with the other students as well? Do you
Absolutely.
think they start to look at Patrick differently?
Completely differently. It was like, well, why is he getting all this attention? You know, but also in a good way. You know, it was like, you know, something's really happening here. You could not, and we were all breathtaking because it was like something's really happening, because it wasn't like Shadow did this to everybody. He had done it to nobody. You know, he'd been there several times and never had this, you know, response. And it was compelling to watch. It was so happy. It was like, you know, it was like a happy bomb, you know, I mean, it was like you couldn't not be enthralled by it. I mean, it stopped the class, you know, because it was just, that was the most interesting thing in the room, you know, that moment. And, you know, I was still talking about it. It's years later, and I'm sure he's still thinking about it. And it was just really beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. And a lovely story for then the kids, you know, to be talking about Patrick in a different way, you know. He would then become this hero of the dog as opposed to a kid that never spoke. And
yeah, he was invisible before.
Yeah.
You know, and Shadow made him visible.
Yeah. Wow. It's so beautiful. Wow, Genie. I'm just so fascinated with all of this. It's just beautiful. And so what did you learn, because I know that you've worked in animal shelters before, so what did you learn about animal trauma volunteering in shelters, and what is vitamin S?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. You know, probably some of your viewers have volunteered in shelters, so they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Shelters are very difficult places because if the animals aren't traumatized when they come in, they'll be traumatized when they get out. You know, it's a very hard place for an animal to be because they have no freedom of choice. They can't choose when to go out to go potty. They can't choose when to eat. They can't choose when to connect with people. They can't choose when to get away from the noise. Their senses are overwhelmed by the smells, the sounds, the sights, and literally they go into an overwhelmed state. And some people say it's about 2 weeks in a shelter that the animals will start to have this stress response.
Okay.
So, you know, and I mean, thank God for shelters. I'm not anti-shelter, but it's just that they do the best they can with the resources they have, and they don't have enough resources. And the number one thing they don't have resources for is to attend to the emotional lives of the animals. And so this is where things go really haywire because they're, they get walked or whatever, but, if there's volunteers, but they don't have people who are connecting with them, so they are without connection, and yet there's so much activity. And one of the things that I discovered, and this is my theory, but I discovered working in the shelter, is that animals get their senses out of order in a shelter environment. What I mean by that is a healthy dog is going to approach you nose first, meaning they're going to smell you. They're going to look and hear. They're doing it all at once, but the nose is really where they're getting the sort of the critical data. Mm-hmm. And in a shelter environment, there's so many scents, good and bad. There's, pee and poop, I could say those words. There's, all that cleaner that they have to use to get rid of the, germs. And there's, food that they can smell, but they can't have. It's just, there's so many dogs that they can't meet, but they can hear them. And so what happens is they start over relying on their ears and their eyes. So they start watching everything, barking at everything, because their noses got overwhelmed, and their nose, I feel, starts to shut down. So now they're hypervigilant, listening to everything, watching everything, then they're jumping at you. Somebody walks by, boom, they're all leaping up and barking. Mm-hmm. And we have to get their senses back in order quickly, which fortunately is very easy. We can do that with stinky hot dogs. We go in with stinky hot dogs, and right away, even a traumatized dog is interested, because there's a new smell that they probably haven't had in a while, if ever. And their nose begins to come back online, which settles down their eyes and their ears, settles down their nervous system. So this is one of the things I would do with animals that were traumatized in the shelters, is begin to get them going nose first in their interactions with me. And the way I would do that is that I would be very, very still, very, very quiet. I wouldn't look at them, no eye contact. I'm talking about a traumatized dog now, right? Yeah. So, and I would just have a treat in my hand. If dog was very scared and hiding in the corner, I would just toss the treat near them, not at their face, but just where they have to look left or right. I want them to actually turn their head, turn their eyes, as part of the therapy of getting their nervous systems to reset. And once they get comfortable taking that treat that's tossed towards them, I'm going to toss it a little closer to me, and they get used to, okay, person treat. So I'm making a new link between a human that they haven't met and getting a delicious stinky treat. And what begins to happen is that they get nose oriented, and that begins to help them calm down. And then I can begin to work on what I call vitamin S, which is the sense of safety. So S for safety, vitamin S. And animals that are feeling traumatized or frightened or scared or shy are short on vitamin S. Mm-hmm. And I can go and do my Reiki healing and all this other stuff. It's not going to have anywhere near the impact until I develop a sense of safety. Once I develop a sense of safety, then we can begin to develop trust. Once I've developed trust, then they receive healing in an instant. So I don't have to work as long, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're now ready to receive. If I just go in there and try to heal the scared animals, as if I'm some great healer, which I'm not. I am a healer, but, but the fact is that's not the way. That's not it. What I want is to retrain their nervous system so they can handle what they're facing. So I want to get them back into a balanced state, which for a dog is nose first. Mm-hmm. And for a human, that might be eyes first or ears first or touch first. It's going to be different for a human. And some dogs will have some variability. But in general, if you get their nose working, they are now in curiosity, which for a dog is the opposite of fear.
Yes. Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we have to do.
Wow. Oh, so beautiful. I love it. Now, Jeannie, you talked about the 33 principles of the human-animal connection. And so what is the principle of towards and away?
I really love that principle. The notion is that first of all, animals have a perfect, what we call towards and away, which means that they move towards what is good and desired and positive, and away from what is threatening or scary or not good for them. Okay. Mm-hmm. So a healthy animal moves towards what's good, away from what's scary, painful, or disturbing, right? But what happens is when a human animal or an animal gets traumatized, their towards and away gets messed with. I'll just put it that way, very scientific term, messed with, meaning that it's not their impulses and their instincts start to get out of sync, and now they're moving away from even what's good. So even a human with some food, A traumatized animal will move away from even a positive offer. You want to go for a walk? No, I don't want to go for a walk. I'm scared. I want to be in the back of my kennel, So what happens is towards and away gets messed up. And they literally are doing the opposite of what would help them get adopted. They're cowering in their kennel, or they're jumping in their kennel, or they're barking in their kennel. They're doing everything that makes people go, I'm not going to stay with that dog, or the dog is trembling. They're going to just walk on because they don't want to scare the dog, So they're doing behaviors that are the opposite of what would help them get out of the shelter. So we have to get there towards and away, straightened out. And the same thing, when people have been traumatized, you take someone who's experienced abuse and violence in the home, they go out and they marry that same person. It's a different person, but it's the same person.
Yes.
Or they finally get out of that house, they move all the way across the country and they meet the same person. Because the habit of moving towards what is painful is familiar, which is stronger than the mind overriding and saying this is not good. So this familiarity, becomes a magnet, right?
Yeah.
So then people are making the wrong choices for them, unhealthy choices. And it's all about these negative habit forms, which become like magnets in the brain. And this is the same for animals. So when we get this straightened out, then the animal can move towards what feels good, towards that treat, towards that human, towards that good energy. They're still going to stay away from energy that they think is not good. But now they can recognize, okay, good energy, I can move towards it. So it's really helpful for people and animals to understand that this is our natural animal sense. This is our animal sense. When we connect with our animal nature, which is one of the principles also in the human-animal connection, learning how to connect with your animal senses, this is the most fundamental one that we usually talk to people about because it's so easy to understand. We can understand, am I attracted to what's good for me and healthy, or am I attracted to what's not so good and healthy? So we need to get that sorted out in order to have a happy life.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that, everything that you're talking about, it still comes back to that feeling safe. So
Exactly.
it's the same as humans and animals, isn't it? When we feel safe, then I guess everything else in our environment and in our world seems to function normally because we have that feeling of safety. But when that's taken away, then all our other senses get, as you said, out of whack, and we don't know how to behave. So a dog is exactly the same.
Exactly. So just going back to the human example, if a child has grown up in an abusive household, they get attracted to an abuser because that is familiar safe, not true safe, but familiar safe.
Yeah.
So it becomes too compelling a force. The prefrontal cortex, the part that can say, wait a minute, this is not good. This is a red flag. This behavior, I should notice this on the first date. Well, no, they're not noticing it. It goes familiar. Let me go do this.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there's a tremendous drive towards familiarity, and it can override true safety.
True safety. Yeah. And so how can animal communication transform our relationship with animals?
Completely.
I have no doubt.
Because if we take first of all, once you start communicating with animals, you no longer can see them as like subservient or lower beings, lower consciousness. You recognize, like that rabbit telling the potential animal communicator that he was a philosopher and she was not at his level. You start to recognize they got some serious stuff to share with us. You know what I mean? They've had other lives. If you believe in reincarnation, this is probably not their first time around. Yeah. So different animals have different things to say. Some are like, I remember once I had this session with this horse, and he was a 40-year-old horse, which is very old for a horse, and all in a very holistic barn. They did everything, all this great food, everything, laser therapy, everything good. So we had this beautiful session where he was basically showing me the nature of the energy work that he does with the Earth's grid lines. Like really sophisticated stuff. It was like at the edge of what I could comprehend. You know what I mean? I was trying to find words to express this, and I was not so, he was so far above me. And then at the end of the session, I, as I often do, I say, is there anything else you would like to say to your people? And he said, I would like more treats. And this was such a profound lesson to me, because it was like I had maybe some concept of some animals are very high and some animals are not as evolved, and and he was showing me that he could be both. He could be both a horse that wants more treats and this incredible alchemist of energy, that was working at such a level that was just incomprehensible. And this horse, whose name was Blue, he would only talk to me if I was in my highest state of consciousness. Like if I was just in my usual sort of run of the mill, not really here kind of, thing that we all have from time to time, he wouldn't talk to me. I mean, for months, he wouldn't talk to me. And then I would come and I would get centered and get clear and get to my best potential. And then he would tell me something really important. So he was training me, that's like, if you want to talk to me, you got to come to my level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful gift he gave you.
It really was amazing. It
Yeah.
really helped me to understand that we all have all these different levels. We have the level of like, give me treats. We all have that level, right? Give me what I want right now. And we have our, other levels that can have a bigger view. And yeah, it's really sweet. Really was a really sweet lesson.
Yeah.
But also where it becomes really important, of course, is end of lifetime. When an animal's getting to that point where it's transition time, if you can communicate or you work with a good communicator that you trust, and you can really have a conversation and say, so are you ready? I want to do what's right for you. I want to do it. You tell me how you want it. Tell me how you want it. I was talking with a friend of mine, another animal communicator who has a little sanctuary for dogs that are in hospice. So these are all dogs that they're going to die. She takes them from the shelter when they're on their last, right?
Okay, yeah.
And she says to them, what would you like your last days to be? And it's so interesting what they say. So this one dog said to her, I would like to ride around in a golf cart, ride around in the neighborhood, and I would like to have a dog ice cream at the end, And so they got a golf cart, and he couldn't walk. They lifted him in the cart, and they put him in a pretty tutu, and he was a little skinny, and they didn't want him to look, sad.
Yeah.
Everybody loved him, came out to see him, and people gave him treats and ice cream, and he was so happy. It was just one of the things that he wanted. And so if you can talk to the animal and find out what's on their bucket list,
yeah,
and it's usually very simple stuff. I want to go to the beach, or I want to just stay with you, or I just want to be here. And, it's not, like I want to go to Disneyland or something like that,
Yeah.
But it's so what it does for the human, if you've had that conversation, that you've asked, that you've listened, and that you've honored to the best of your ability, then it helps ease the guilt, the shame, the horror, the pain, the anger, all the emotions that we have on losing an animal, if we know that we've done what they've asked for and the best, we've done our best to give them what they wanted.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, you've talked a lot about treats, and so I'm curious to know we know that if we as humans have too much sugar, or, particularly if kids have a lot of sugar, they get really hyper. And so is it the same with animals? Like, are the treats and the food that we give animals just as important?
Yeah, it's important to give healthy treats. If you're giving junk treats, then it's not so great, right? But if you're giving homemade treats, like in my book,
yes, yeah,
I have homemade treats,
yes,
and they're very simple. What did I make the other day? Okay, my favorite one, newest one, doggy ice cream. So it's goat's milk. So a cup of goat's milk, a half cup of frozen strawberries, a half cup of frozen bananas, and a date if you have one around. Blend it in the blender. It comes out like this ice cream. They love it, and I love it. So we can share the same. When you're making healthy food, you can share. You don't have to cook twice. You make a meal, we both eat it, right? So I have scrambled eggs for breakfast with, whatever I have around, spinach or yams I'll throw in, or whatever I have, and I eat most of it, and the rest, it's 2 eggs, and I eat, my part, and then the rest of it is distributed to the 3 dogs. So they get a second breakfast. Hobbits, they get a little less than their first breakfast. But the point being is that we can share foods, and so it is important to give healthy treats, not just junk treats. That's really important. But a lot of people are afraid that, well, I'm going to spoil my dog. Well, you should spoil your dog.
Right.
I mean, obviously too much is too much. There's always a balance, but in general, treats are wonderful for teaching. If you want to teach new behavior, you
Okay.
want to reward new behavior,
Mm-hmm.
treats are your best friend.
Yeah.
And also in the shelter environment, when I'm meeting a new dog, I'll offer a treat. I know right away the level of stress or trauma or fear the dog is feeling, because if they're okay, they'll take the treat. If not, they won't. And so I can calibrate the changes in the dog's behavior as I'm with them over 30 minutes or so. I spend a long time with them, each one. So I can use the treats as a way of understanding their stress level. So when they're ready, they're going to take a treat out of my hand, which usually happens, you know, even with the very scaredest dogs, they're going to be in most cases in one session. Sometimes not. It depends on the fear.
Yeah.
So treats are our friends, but we as the adults, the parent in the situation, if you will, it's our responsibility to make sure that those treats are as healthy as we can, and not just the junky. I don't know about how it is where you live, but in the U.S., a lot of treats are just pure junk here.
Yeah.
So you're better off making the treats. And the thing about treats is a dog would rather have 5 small treats than one big one, usually.
Okay.
So you can really use this to ask the dog, show me something that I want to see, like a sit or a down or whatever it is, and you're going to get a treat. And what they learn is they have the ability to control an interaction. You ask for the cue, you say sit, we'll just use the example of sit, say sit, they choose to sit, they get a treat. It's very empowering for them, because they say, oh, I know how to manipulate my human. She says sit, I sit, I get a treat. This is easy, and it's fun. It's a happy experience, because food is very important to dogs. Food is love to dogs. It's to us too, but to them even more. It really is life and death, right? Because they're not going out in the wild and getting a chicken, right? So it's us who's going to be giving food or not. So it needs to, obviously everything is about balance. If you're giving 100 treats a day, you're way out of balance. But if you're giving 3, 4, 5 treats a day, that's great. But I'm going to usually ask for them for something. So because I have 3 dogs, they have to sit for a treat, because otherwise it would be like, crazy, right? So they know they have to sit. So, and there's a certain place in the living room where they get their treats, not in the kitchen, because that's too energizing, right? So they have to walk to the living room. They have to sit down, all 3 in position. And there's an order. Sophia gets the treat first. Harry gets the treat second, and Bailey gets the treat third. Now that may seem like, why are you doing that? Well, the reason why I'm doing that is so they can predict the order of things, because it gives them vitamin S, safety, comfort, that they know this is the order. I don't have to worry about jockeying or trying to get it, because I know the order. So it's actually a very kind thing to do if you have multiple dogs, to have a routine like that, a simple routine.
Okay. Oh, that's good. That's a great tip. That's really good. Yeah, very good tip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, Jeannie, I believe that you've got a special offer for our audience today.
Yes, I do. And I can't remember what it is.
So it's about sending you an email with a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you have a question for your animal, you can email me, and you have all that information, right? They're going to get that, or okay.
Yeah.
So yes, so email me. It's called Ask Your Animal, and you can email me a question, and I will do my best to tune into your animal and give you an answer. It would help me if you give me the animal's name, their gender, whether it's a dog, a cat, or horse. Just tell me. You don't have to say it's a Pekingese. Just say, it's a dog. Okay. And tell me whether they're alive or in spirit. So
okay.
That's
great.
What they need to tell me.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So, Jeannie, we only have a couple of minutes left, which I'm actually really sad about, because I could sit here and speak to you about this for hours and hours. But with only a couple of minutes left, I'll ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests before we finish our conversation. So what is your favorite quote, and why is it so important to you?
I had it before and I forgot it. What was it?
Do you want me to
do you remember?
You?
Did I give you a quote?
And it was a Gregory Maguire quote.
Yeah.
Animals are born.
Oh, yeah. They're born who they are. I forget the exact words, but they're born who they are, and they accept it. They don't try to be something that they're not. which is such great wisdom. I mean, it's like Shadow, the 130-pound bull mastiff next to my Sophia, who's a 30-pound Chihuahua Terrier mix. And, Sophia doesn't want to be the bull mastiff. The bull mastiff doesn't want to be Sophia. And we do that in class. We line up 5 very different dogs. We talk about that. They're so different, and each one accepts their own uniqueness. That's a very good lesson for us humans.
Absolutely. It really is. Genie, thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful work with us today.
You're welcome.
I knew that animals were amazing and that they had the power to heal, but today you have confirmed what I and many others have believed. So I wish you all the very best with your new book as well. I'm certain that there's going to be many dogs out there that will benefit from your recipes and feel healthier because of it. I also want to thank all of our amazing and dedicated listeners and supporters and our audience. And I hope that you all have an amazing and beautiful weekend. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you so much, Genie. I've really enjoyed this. It's been amazing.
Thank you.